Buenos días a todos y a todas.
Good morning to all
Si
of
les
you.
parece, empezamos
If you
y
agree, we could get
quiero pedir
started this
disculpas por
morning.
el
I do
retraso
have
que hemos
to
tenido, que con la lluvia y los
apologize
controles de
for the
seguridad
delays
se
that
ha
we've had
atrasado
with
más de
the
lo que
rain and
hubiéramos
with the
deseado.
security checks to get in.
Decirles antes de
We've taken a
empezar
little
esta
longer than we
sesión
wanted
número
to
2
get
que
started.
como estaba prevista una
Let
pausa
me
café
explain that we had
de media hora, la
expected to have
eliminaríamos.
a
A todos
half
les
an hour
parece
coffee
bien.
break
La
during the
gente
morning.
puede
We're
ir
going
tomando
to
café porque está el servicio
not
al
have
mismo
that.
tiempo y
You
así,
can go off and
como hay
have your
muchas personas
coffee
que
during the
tienen que
meeting, go and bring
coger
it back.
diferentes aviones
If
y
you
diferentes
agree,
medios de transporte para
people have
facilitar
to
que
go
podamos
off and get
hacer
their
todo el programa tal y como
planes,
está
their flights,
previsto, la
and other
segunda
forms of
sesión, la
transport. So
sesión
to
de
be able to get
clausura
through
y luego
this session too,
dirigirnos al
and then the
Palomar,
closing
que está
session,
aquí
and then
al
go
lado
off to
para
the
hacer el cóctel
Palomar
final.
for the final
Y
reception,
por tanto que
we
podamos
need
tener tiempo de
to
todo.
perhaps
Empezamos
have time
entonces
for
sin
everything
más
without the coffee
demoras
break. So without
la
further
sesión
ado,
número 2,
let's
que
get
lleva por
started with
título el
session 2.
fortalecimiento de
The
la
title
Unión
of this session
Europea
is
desde una
Strengthening the
perspectiva
European Union
económica
from
y
an economic
social.
and social
Las nuevas
perspective.
reglas
The new
presupuestarias de
fiscal
la Unión
rules of the
Europea
European
y el
Union
refuerzo de la Unión
and
Económica y
enhancement of the
Monetaria en el
Economic and
contexto
Monetary
de la futura
Union in the
ampliación,
context
los
of
derechos
prospective
sociales
enlargement,
y
social
los
rights,
retos
and
medioambientales y el
environmental
cambio
challenges and
climático.
climate change.
En esta sesión tenemos dos oradores
We have two
principales a los
keynote
que les
speakers
daremos un
in
tiempo de
this
5 minutos,
session.
que
You
yo
will each
pido que
have
todos
5 minutes,
respetemos
and I
los
would
tiempos para poder hacer
ask you
bien
kindly
la jornada y
to
que
keep
todos
to your allotted
tengamos
times if
la
you could,
posibilidad de
speakers, so that we
intervenir.
can
Y
all
hay
get a chance to
solicitadas
intervene.
como turno de
And
palabra
we
12
have
intervenciones de
12
diferentes
requests
presidentes
for the floor
y
from
presidentas
a
de
number of
parlamentos.
speakers and
Si
deputy
les
speakers
parece,
from European
empezaríamos
Parliament.
con los
So
oradores
let's get started
principales
with our
y en
keynote
primer
speakers. And the
lugar
first
tiene la
speaker
palabra el
will
señor
be Mr. Othmar Karas,
vicepresidente
who is the
primero
first
del
Vice President of
Parlamento
the European
Europeo, en
Parliament,
representación de la presidenta
speaking
del
here on behalf of the
Parlamento
Speaker of the European
Europeo, la
Parliament,
señora
Roberta
Metsola. Cuando
Metsola. Whenever you're ready.
Madam President, dear colleagues, good morning to all of you. Now, the European Parliament, as we speak,
die Einigung mit dem
is
Rat zur
discussing
Reform der
an agreement
wirtschaftspolitischen
pertaining
Steuerung.
to a
Zum
reform
Mittag
of
wird diese
economic
beschlossen
policy
werden.
governance, and at noon
Das zeigt, dass wir
this
seit der letzten
decision will be made. This
Speakers-Konferenz vor
means
einem
that
Jahr in
since the
Prag
last Speakers' Conference 1
gutes
year
Stück
ago in Prague,
vorangekommen
we
sind.
made considerable headway.
Das gemeinsame Regelwerk für
Common rules
Haushaltsdefizite und
for budget
Staatsschulden
deficits
wird
and
klarer,
sovereign debt. These
weniger
common rules
komplex,
will be
besser
clearer, less
zugeschnitten
complex,
und verpflichtender.
tailor-made, and
Die
more
Ausnahmeregelungen,
binding.
die wir seit der Pandemie
Exceptions that we've had ever since the pandemic
beendet.
will be discontinued.
Nach der Pandemie und
Following the
wir haben
pandemic,
nach der Pandemie einige
we've
neue
embarked
Herausforderungen
on
erhalten.
some new challenges. Just think about
gegen die
Russia's
Ukraine.
war of aggression
Wir haben
against
die
Ukraine. That has been the major
großteils die
challenge.
Regeln deshalb und wegen der Pandemie ausgesetzt.
Due to the pandemic, some
haben wir
of
sie
the
erneuert,
rules were discontinued. Now
reformiert
they have been
und
reformed,
angepasst.
they have been adapted.
Meine Damen und Herren,
Now,
damit
ladies and
ist es
gentlemen,
aber noch lange nicht
But
getan.
this is not the end of it.
Erstens,
We need to continue working.
Neben der konsequenten Reduzierung der
We need to
Schulden
consistently reduce sovereign
benötigen
debt.
wir auch ein
Over and above that,
gemeinsames Verständnis
we
über die
also
notwendigen
need to arrive at a
strategischen
clear understanding of what strategic
und
investments to make and what
Wir
reforms
müssen die
to
grüne
embark on.
digitale
The green
soziale
digital
Transformation
social
endlich
transformation
gemeinsam als
needs
Chance
to
begreifen.
be
Im
considered
Sinne
an
unseres
opportunity
Ordnungsmodells der nachhaltigen sozialen
in line
Marktwirtschaft.
with sustainable
Green Deal
social
ist
economy
nicht
and
nur ein
governance principles. The Green Deal
Klimaschutzprogramm,
is not just a climate protection
sondern vor allem
policy
auch ein
or program.
Wirtschafts-,
It's also
Umwelt-, Bildungs- und
something that invests
Investitionsbereich.
heavily in social affairs and
die
economic
Europäische
affairs and
Union
education and
zum
much more.
Weltmarktführer
The European
bei den
Union
grünen
needs to become a
Technologien machen.
global
Den
leader
Hand aufs
for
Herz,
green
nach der Telekommunikation und
technologies.
der Digitalisierung
Telecommunication, digitization, we all know these buzzwords, but we must not lose sight of what the US, China, and other Asian states are doing. We must hold our own vis-à-vis those powers. If we were to do this, Europe's competitiveness would be endangered. Now, as far as security and defense policy is concerned, we need a joint European Union where every single euro is spent in line with the requirements of the strategic compass and the creation of a common defense union. The armies need to be made compatible with each other. Compatibility is quite important, interoperability. And this is the first point. And now I'm appealing to you, the national parliaments. Without you, the second goal cannot be achieved. Cooperation enhances efficiency and also cuts costs. The European Parliament and its divisions have pointed out that strict fiscal policy coordination among us at European level, well, this will save up to 100 billion euro per year, or would generate up to 100 billion euro per year. This money lies fallow and needs to be utilized. Now, we can only harness this if all the states follow up with their reform efforts during this European semester. Now, you have budget sovereignty in your member states. Unfortunately, only 1/5 of all national recommendations has been substantially put into practice by the member states over the past few years. So the member states have an obligation to do this. The governments of the national parliaments are called on to take action and to follow suit. Cherry-picking needs to come to an end, because this results in a patchwork that costs money, that diminishes our forces or power and trust. We need to enhance the role of parliaments. We need to enhance transparency, democratic legitimacy, accountability, as well as ownership. We need to increase all of these assets. Then we need to boost trade. And if there is just bilateral trade as opposed to trade in single market, this weakens all of us. Enlargement needs to go hand in hand with a deepening of the European Union. Close economic coordination needs to take into account the finalization of the single market, economic, monetary union, capital and banking union, telecommunication, energy and healthcare union. It cannot supplant all of these. And I come to the fifth point, which is last but not least. We need to focus on the five presidents' report of 2015, as well as the results of the Conference on the Future of Europe. All of this needs to be put into practice and discussed. We need to have clear-cut timelines in terms of who is responsible for what and what decisions need to be made. The report on the single market written by Enrico Letta, as well as the future report concerning the competitiveness of Europe penned by Mario Draghi, they cannot be just shelved. No, the cornerstones, they need to form the cornerstones of the work program of the European Commission for the next 5 years. So this paper needs to result in a program of work. If we take what I've enumerated seriously, we are able to seize the opportunities that exist in order to enhance Europe's competitiveness. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchísimas gracias, señor Karas. Tiene ahora la palabra como orador principal Georgios Georgantas, vicepresidente del Parlamento Helénico.
Vice President of the Hellenic Parliament has the floor. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, allow me to focus with my paper in the new fiscal rules and how they can contribute to achieve the objectives of the European Union and each member state separately. The new fiscal rules seem to have the capacity to substantially reinforce the Union economically and socially, although it is quite early to assess their impact since they have not been applied in practice. They seem to possess some powerful advantages compared to the rules in force. History has shown that the existing framework suffers from various drawbacks, mainly because it is based to a great extent to figures that are not observable and which are quite volatile. This means that predictability is reduced, which is necessary for fiscal planning. Moreover, we should not ignore the impact of the recent crisis to the public finances of the member states. As we exit from the crisis, the member states must gradually return to prudent fiscal positions and to have their debt indicators to a gradually declining course. But we have to ensure that this adjustment process will not be so drastic so as to create unfavorable impact on the economic activity and to reduce the growth rates of European economies. We have to ensure that in the coming years we will not have unfeasibly high fiscal targets which will not be considered as reliable by the markets. It is especially dubitable whether the rules in force as regards the debt reduction course can take into account these needs. It is important to ensure that the member states will commit themselves to achieve these objectives, but at the same time they have to preserve the necessary flexibility as regards the means and the policies in order to achieve them. We should not forget that these targets should pertain also to accession members, that is, the candidate member states, because enlargement, as we have seen, has given benefits both to the Union and to the member states. Talking about the green transition, we should not forget that the new fiscal rules of the European Union put the emphasis on the fact that the member states must consolidate their finances together with major investments in order to be turned turn themselves from fossil fuels to renewable energy sources. To this end, it is given more time for each time of consolidation and for reforms, but mainly for investments. At this conference, we are given the opportunity to discuss about the ways to adjust to the new fiscal rules. We are given the opportunity to consider about the utility, the usefulness of extending the period of adjustment for the member states, which can be very useful, especially to provide incentives to the member states. It can be useful also to recognize the valuable fiscal space that can be used to face the important investment challenges that the Union is facing. These challenges are the result of policies that were followed in the previous decade, taking into account the necessary fiscal adjustment. This was an erroneous political choice, which was dictated by the previous fiscal rules, and it has led a visible impact on the increase of productivity. We should not forget that important investment challenges are coming from the common priorities of the Union. At this point, in concluding, the new framework is an important reform towards the right direction. Its success will be judged by its application. As regards Greece, I am sure that both planning and the execution of the fiscal reform plan will be made in such a way so as to serve effectively the complementary objectives of ensuring sustainable public finances and sustainable self-fed growth. At this point, allow me to emphasize an important expenditure that must be undertaken by the European Union, which is in the sector of defense. Europe must spend a lot of amounts to reinforce its defense capabilities, especially at this current period of major geopolitical uncertainty. These investments will ensure the preservation of the economic and political power of the Union in the global political landscape and the prosperity of the European citizens. In concluding, dear colleagues, we salute the political agreement between the Council and the European Parliament that will allow the application of the new framework in 2024. I believe, dear colleagues, that the timely and faithful application of the new fiscal rules by the Member States is a new field of challenges, and what I mentioned is absolutely necessary to reinforce the fiscal viability and sustainability of the European Union. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Let's move on now to the requests for the floor. Let me give the floor, first of all, to Sean O'Fergal, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives of Ireland.
Thank you, Madam President. Ireland, like our other EU partners, have lots of experience of economic and fiscal crises over the years and within living memory. I'm glad to say that we in Ireland have learned a lot from our mistakes, and the proof of this is our significant economic prosperity, which is down to good policy making and, of course, the benefits of EU membership. I would like to say that Ireland's experience of austerity during the financial crisis is something to avoid. It is now generally viewed that a robust fiscal framework is a good basis to have sustainable fiscal and economic policies. As part of the lessons learned and reforms, our parliamentarians in Ireland have the benefit of the advice of our Parliamentary Budget Office and a Fiscal Advisory Council. Ireland is supportive of the new economic governance framework. It's good to see that Europe too has learned its economic lessons, and we look forward to seeing it through the final stages of the legislative process. I might add also that even prosperity brings its own problems. Ireland, with its ever-growing population, is now experiencing serious issues with the provision of housing, health, education services, to mention just some, and these top the list of issues for all parties in Parliament. The lesson here is that social services must keep in step with economic progress. Concerning enlargement, I would like to say that Ireland is pleased that discussions regarding the enlargement of the EU are continuing. Ireland sees the enlargement process as being of strategic importance both for the existing EU and for those who are seeking to join. Just over 50 years ago, Ireland benefited from the EU's first enlargement. That last half-century of EU membership has transformed our small country, our economy and our society, and has amplified our global influence. We believe every European country deserves the same opportunity, providing they meet the necessary criteria for membership. Enlargement, I believe, is now an even more strategic issue following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The EU must honour the commitments it has made to candidate countries and reward those who have been courageous in implementing reforms and in aligning fully with the EU position, including the position on Ukraine. Finally, I would like to say that the Irish Parliament is very supportive of the principles in the Joint Declaration for more gender-sensitive parliaments, and the document is currently with the respective committees of our Parliament. I'd like to add that the Oireachtas itself has taken many initiatives in the area of gender equality issues. We have a Women's Caucus, and we've initiated 2 key reviews over recent years, the first on a family-friendly and inclusive Parliament, and more recently on safe participation in politics, both of which are focused on ensuring that our Parliament truly reflects the people it represents in all their diversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me give the floor now to Marko Lutric, Speaker of the National Council of Slovenia.
Esteemed colleagues, in a world of uncertainty, and EU stands as beacon for democratic values and unified efforts toward sustainability. Therefore, improving existing framework to promote growth, development and stability with investments and infrastructure, education and sustainable technologies is crucial for the future development of EU. We must ensure that the few fiscal rules and endorsement of otherwise well-intended mechanisms, such as EU carbon border adjustment mechanism, will not present obstacle to the development and competitiveness of EU businesses and world market. In the EU must further adjust its economic governance framework to make it fit for the future, ensuring enough support for the development and new technologies with emphasizing on cybersecurity, maintaining social solidarity and sustainable public financing. In order to ensure stability of the economic and monetary unit, we must provide interesting and stimulating business environment for entrepreneurs and young people, allowing them to join the global race on the equal footing. With strong and good functioning economy, we can have efficient social reforms and social policies that ensure employment and jobs that provide a living wage for European families. strengthening social cohesion and social safety nets, ensuring universally access to quality health care, and integral to building a union that cares for its citizens. Concerning enlargement for EU, and must bear to mind that enlargement itself will not only bring the expansion of market, but will also enrich our common essence, diversity, and increase our resilience. However, the integration requires strong support mechanism backed by strategic investment in commitment to the rule of law. Only by joint efforts and innovation in EU, we chart a path of a future based on prosperity, justice, and sustainability. As the slogan of the Spanish Presidency says, Europe close together is the way to greater global significance and lasting peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now, Valérie Rabault, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of France, has the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Dear colleagues, we now face a challenge in Europe because for the first time in 15 years, we have a huge discrepancy in growth rates compared to the United States, and we have a 2-point difference because we were at 0.5 2 years ago versus a 2-point difference in the US. And in order to continue to be a continent that's at the forefront of social progress for all of our citizens and economic growth, we need to take our economic strategy in hand and to come back to years of economic growth. The first task at hand has to do with investments and investments in the future. When we look at the investment plans that have been put forth by the European Commission and the US, we see similar events because between now and 2035, the U.S. intends on investing $550 billion, and Europe 600 billion. On the other side of the Atlantic, however, there are different priorities. We see that we invest greatly in energy in Europe, but we see that in terms of investment in industry, we have a huge discrepancy where the U.S. has invested about 200 billion, where we have invested much less. I suggest that we focus on investing in the pharmaceutical industry. Another colleague, also the European Parliament and the European Commission, want to focus on education. I would like to underscore the fact that since 2019, 1 hour worked in the U.S. Generates 6% more wealth than as compared to Europe in the same year. And a lot of this has to do with know-how and expertise. I also wanted to dovetail off of what my Greek colleague said, and that has to do with debt and debt financing. We have different kind of agreements amongst ourselves, for instance, about the first loan that needs to be paid back in 2018, and another one that has to do with consolidating debt and fiscal levers and how we manage our deficits. But if, in any way, if we do not want to fall behind the U.S., we must maintain the investment in know-how and the industrial sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Milos Vistrik, Speaker of the Senate of the Czech Republic, has the floor.
Yeah, dear Chairperson, dear colleagues, I think that we should ask ourselves a question. Why are we talking about these new fiscal rules? Why do we feel the need to adopt them? And I think that an answer to that question is quite clear, even though we haven't said it. We search for these rules because we have been living on debt for a very long time, and for a long time we spent more than we earn. And we have to cover the gap by getting money from our citizens. They buy our bonds, for example, that's the better alternative, or we get loans from countries which are not democratic. And we become dependent on these countries, on their raw materials, for example. And I believe that what stands in front of us, the leaders of the Parliament of the EU, there are two tasks. First of all, the strategic autonomy that we talked about yesterday is expensive, and it will hurt if we really want to achieve it. Because we will have to reform maybe our healthcare policy, our social policy. We, of course, have to continue supporting Ukraine, and we should be doing more for those countries that want to join our democratic club. All of that will cost money, and somebody will have to pay for that. And if at the same time we want to be responsible in fiscal terms, it will be the EU member states, it will be our citizens that will have to pay for it. And we have to explain it to the people. It will not be easy, because it means that there will be a change to their standard of living, maybe. It will hurt, it might hurt, and it's difficult to explain it to the people. We might justify it by pointing to what is happening in the world, and that we have to be resilient to be able to protect ourselves from conflicts and threats. So we have to be brave. That's the first task. We have to explain to the people that the situation has changed, and we have to change. And the second task is, again, to be brave and to ask ourselves a question whether we're heading in the right direction, whether it is normal that we were not able to invest more in Africa, for example, that China is buying Africa. And are we active enough in the Indian and Pacific region? Shouldn't we be doing more? Shouldn't we maybe change slightly a direction where we're heading? Are we doing it all well from the fiscal perspective? So I think these are the two tasks that we have in front of us, and we have to think about them in our countries. And we should do everything to be brave, to prove to our people that we are brave and we're able to reform ourselves and to be an important and strong power and to influence what will happen with the European Union and its economy and its fiscal context.
Thank you. Now passing the floor to Laszlo Kövér, Speaker of the National Assembly of Hungary.
Distinguished Madam Speaker, dear colleagues, over the past 5 years, EU policy dictated by the European Union, by the European Commission, has been the biggest failure in the history of the European Union, because Europe, as we have seen, has fallen seriously behind its competitors in the global economic race, and the majority of Europeans are worse off today than they were 5 years ago. What is the main reason for this EU failure, honorable colleagues? According to the renowned American economist Jeffrey Sachs, Brussels is governed by the US. However, I would rather stick to the old wisdom, according to which where human frailty is sufficient explanation, there is no point in looking for something more complicated. The corresponding explanation is that the reason for the failure is that bureaucrats in Brussels are trying to resolve economic challenges by imposing ideological concepts. If our Atlantic ally, the US, is pursuing an energy and industrial policy that gives it unilateral advantages over its European allies, why is the EU unable to respond? Because, ladies and gentlemen, the current EU political elite in Brussels is totally inadequate for the job. The green transition is a great challenge, but it is also a great opportunity. The winners of the future will be those countries that implement the green transition quickly and sensibly. However, what do we see? The Brussels bureaucrats who determine the economic policy of the EU have severely abused climate change policy over the past 5 years, often to the point of economic absurdity. And there is a growing sense that social support for climate change goals and measures is waning, most visibly shown in the farmers' protests in Europe in recent months. The agricultural sector, which provides Europeans with food sovereignty, is being destroyed not only by unacceptable dumpings of dubious quality grain and other products from Ukraine, but also by Brussels over-regulation they call greening. In the times ahead, the EU can only return from ideological turf to economic rationality if it takes into account the differences in economic development and the national specificities of its member states, also the carrying capacity of society and businesses, competitiveness, as well as the interests of citizens and businesses too. Finally, we must state firmly that we reject the emerging practice of joint borrowing and the interpretation of economic governance reform as a way of further centralizing the EU and increasing the power and dominance of EU bureaucracy. All of this will not result in strengthening the EU, but in further dividing and weakening it. Dear colleagues, I wish us all a more successful and more peaceful next 5 years.
Thank you. Jean-François Rapin, Chairman of the European Affairs Committee of the Senate of France, has the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. The EU is facing many simultaneous challenges. Number one, we have the digital and green transitions, and we also have to accompany these changes with social assistance and to see facing also an aging population. We also need to consolidate our independent defense capabilities, support Ukraine against Russia, and also prepare against other attacks on its neighbors from Russia. All of this requires massive investment. The current financial structure at the EU is not enough, and also the pandemic loans that were taken to jumpstart our economies are going to come due soon, and we need to have new sources of income, our own income, or our member states will not be able to meet the debt commitments. And we also hear our voices that are saying we need to come up with, take out another loan to deal with the defense interests, as I said in the beginning of my speech. But this is an untenable equation. We also need to improve our financial architecture in Europe. The current markets are too opaque and liquid to be able to finance our companies and to face our main competitors. Since 2015, we have undertaken several efforts to deal with European capital markets. We have increasing regulatory procedure structure, and a lot was done under the European presidency of the European Union. Nevertheless, our markets are not deep enough and not developed enough. We see that we have 227% of GDP to cover the financial markets faced, and we have too many too few bonds compared with the rest of the world. We also need to have a harmonized financial and wider and deeper financial ecosystem. This will help us be able to have more attractive and diverse investments. Small and medium-sized businesses should have a better access to financial markets and also banking systems. And we could, for instance, have an opening of bonds to small and medium-sized businesses. Also, an ambitious and realistic avenue should be pursued. Also, we see that report was presented at the last. But unfortunately, despite a report that was presented, we do not have enough impetus from our leaders, and so we really have to overhaul the conditions for financing businesses within the European Union. Thank you. Thank you. Now, the President of Peter Ziga, Acting Speaker of the National Council of Slovakia, has the floor.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Let me begin by thanking the Spanish Presidency for hosting this conference. I consider such meetings extremely important for the interparliamentary dialogue and exchange of views on topical issues. Having in mind the goal, achievement of long-term economic ambitions of the European Union, we consider the reform of the EU economic governance framework extremely important, since it has the potential to accelerate economic convergence. The new framework represents a significant step towards greater economic stability, deeper integration among member states, better alignment and mutual support. We welcome the revised framework. It is better adapted to the growing fiscal diversity and other vulnerabilities among member states. In this context, its effective implementation and ongoing close coordination of economic policies in the EU are important. The updated rules are also crucial for the potential future enlargement of the EU. Enlargement of the economic and monetary union presents both opportunities and promise of strengthening the EU's economic resilience and global competitiveness through its increased market size and diversity. Also aware of the challenges related to ensuring economic convergence and stability within the framework of enlargement, we consider essential that the candidate countries align with the fiscal rules and economic governance framework of the Union to support the stability of the euro and foster economic cohesion. In connection with the social policy of the European Union, we appreciate that the European pillar of social rights is once again among its top priorities. I would like to highlight that most of the principles were defined in the form of recommendations. Member states could thus develop their own implementation plans and goals reflecting their specific conditions. I would like to appreciate the discussion related to the European Pillar of Social Rights. It reflects current challenges that have a direct impact on the social sector in the European Union, and in particular, climate change, automation and technological progress, growing impact of artificial intelligence, changing job demands of the labour market, low housing accessibility, and many others. At the same time, let me point out the fact that, unfortunately, the aspirations for substantially upward social convergence have largely remained unmet. Therefore, we strongly appeal for the building of a social Europe within the framework of the principles of the European Pillar of Social Rights in practical terms. The European Union social policy should therefore refocus from being perceived as abstract and distant to...
Thank you.
Tiene la palabra ahora señor Andrija Mandic, presidente del Parlamento de Montenegro.
Uvaženi predsjednici parlamenata zemalja članica Europske unije, uvaženi predsjednici parlamenata zemalja kandidata, cijenjeni gosti. Crna Gora je posle perioda turbulentnih političkih prilika stvaranjem nove parlamentarne većine i formiranjem vlade započela jedan novi moment stabilnosti. Ta stabilnost je rezultat potpune predanosti parlamentarne većine, ideje izgradnje društva mira, stabilnosti i prosperiteta.
Sí, un momento, presidente, es que no llegaba la traducción en inglés. Ahora está llegando ya. Por tanto, si quiere proceder con la palabra. Gracias.
We're waiting for the Montenegrin interpretation. You may be...
Sí, presidente, ya puede intervenir cuando quiera.
Chair, you may.
Our
stability is the result of the full devotion of our parliament to build the society of peace, stability and prosperity as our key foreign policy goal, and this is our full membership of the European Union. This goal is very important for us, given the fact that around 80% of our citizens do support our membership of the EU. The role of us as the political representatives is to confirm this willingness and to be sincere partner to the EU. The results achieved by the new parliament together with the government of Montenegro for a very brief period of time gives us a perfect position to be the first next member of the EU. The results that we have achieved, especially when it comes to our judiciary, because in this way we discontinued the institutional crisis, but also we implemented the key economic reforms in order to converge our standard with the standard of the EU, were strongly supported by our citizens and our partners. Our country has been characterized as a front runner in the region when it comes to the EU integration, and that's why we are in anticipation of our closing phase of negotiations. What the Parliament of Montenegro especially appreciates, and I believe that I speak on the government as well, is the adoption of the new growth plan for the Western Balkans, which will encourage the economy of the aspirant countries before joining the EU, and I believe that this will especially strengthen the countries such as Montenegro, which does not have any open issues with its neighbors. We know that the framework of economic management is a key pillar of the economic monetary union, and its aim is to prevent the macroeconomic disbalance that may deteriorate the national economy. And we know that the EU economy is now facing with the challenges of COVID crisis and wars in its borders. In this context, the EU decided to reform the Pact of Stability and Growth. In this, we welcome the main goal of this reform of the EU to provide health and sustainable public finances, and also to promote sustainable and inclusive growth in all member states through reforms and investments. In the context of the reform of the monetary policy of the EU, I believe that the enlargement policy would be very beneficial for the economy of the EU. Our membership of our country, which has around 500,000 of citizens, would not be in any way a burden for the economy of the EU, but on the contrary, it could contribute to it. In the end, let me conclude to all of you for your devoted assistance to Montenegro on its European path, and let me reiterate my conviction that we will see each other very soon, but that Montenegro on that occasion will be presented as a full member of the EU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we pass the floor to Eliane Tillieu, Speaker of the Chamber of Representatives of Belgium. Thank you very much, dear colleague. After the COVID-19 pandemic, Europe temporarily suspended fiscal rules so as to allow to give a buffer for financial assistance to companies and to deal with the pandemic. But now, since budgetary issues are back on the table, we have to strengthen and go to try to come up with more budgetary flexibility and encourage investments that will allow us to improve well-being of our citizens and reduce the risk of recession. In the budgetary rules meeting, the text says that governments have to adjust their budgetary trajectory over 7 years if they make other investments in terms of social rights and part of the green and digital transition. The Parliament also, in its resolution on March 15th, 2023, decided to strengthen, improve the cornerstone of social rights, and Belgium is following in that suit. We also are going to make sure that the European base of social rights is strong and well implemented. And so I personally am convinced that the economic market and economic progress will only be sustainable if we accompany it with increased social protections. Also, the lack of workforce means that we have to rethink things. And in Belgium, we have made some significant accomplishments and step forwards that are in line with the European social decisions, and in 7 weeks we will approve things. But in the meantime, in Belgium, we have a law that will forbid the selling of products that were produced in Europe under forced labor conditions. We also are committed to the digital platform directive. Belgium is a pioneer in that regard by being the first country to giving gig workers their own protections and social protections. The high-level conference on April 15th and 16th, trying to talk about the future and the 2024 to 2029 five-year period, focuses on solidarity, integration, and social justice, as well as gender equality. The future of the social pillar is the future of Europe itself. We need to handle turbulence, geopolitical turbulence at our own borders, and we have to also manage European enlargement, make sure that it happens with a strong regulatory background, and also making sure that we take into account the mobility of the workforce. Those are the few points that I wanted to touch on this morning. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Speaker. Now, Elvira Kovacs, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of Serbia, has the floor.
Thank you, distinguished Chair, dear colleagues. Serbia is steadily facing the multi-layer crisis faced by the entire world, being constantly cautious and taking measures with which we are managing to keep the stability of public finance, economic growth, increasing number of jobs and living standards of our citizens, which are all major challenges, even for much more developed countries. Since my time is limited, I would like to stress only a few things. First of all, that the single labor market of Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia has been officially established, and this will contribute to further economic progress and larger investments in our region, as well as to improving life quality of signatory party citizens. Citizens of Serbia, Albania, and North Macedonia will have a possibility to enter any signatory party's territory with a valid personal document on free movement, and they will be provided with the possibility of employment in all 3 countries without work permits. It is very important for us to attract new labor force from the region. Most recent developments, as we could just hear from the colleague, related to the Western Balkan region are that the European Commission has adopted a new growth plan for the Western Balkans with the aim of boosting economic growth and accelerating much-needed socio-economic convergence. The growth plan for the Western Balkans will provide the unique possibility for closer cooperation with the European Union, and in particular a new incentive for an expedient integration into the single EU market, as an area where it is possible to establish closer ties with the Union before achieving a full-fledged membership. However, it should be underlined that the growth plan should not replace the negotiation process, but rather be an incentive to socio-economic development that will enable progress for all of us in the Western Balkans and accelerate the enlargement process. Serbia will continue with the strategic planning in all areas of EU integration and prepare for the future in the European Union. We will continue to implement reforms and change the image of the European Union in Serbia. We will do our best to stop the growth of Euroscepticism. It should be indicated that the enlargement is a two-way street, and that Serbia cannot be expected to meet the accession criteria without the European Union offering a credible enlargement perspective and substantial incentives that can provide real solutions to structural problems and outstanding bilateral issues. Enlargement preparation processes need to run simultaneously both in the European Union and in the candidate countries. To achieve this, the enlargement process needs to be reformed to enable citizens of candidate countries to use the incentive advantages of EU membership even before the formal accession. Candidate countries that are making progress in reforms need to be allowed to gradually integrate during the negotiation process by giving them access to common EU policies such as the single market, access to funds, and observer status in relevant bodies. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you,
Speaker. Now, Manuela Schwesig, Speaker of the Bundesrat of Germany, has the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, colleagues. Yesterday, we spoke about how important it was to defend peace, freedom, and democracy in Europe. And of course, economic strength, prosperity, and justice are inextricably linked to this. Only if we are economically strong will we have the strength to defend our values. Madam President, you mentioned the importance of the Mediterranean in your welcome. I would like to highlight another sea in Europe, the Baltic Sea. The democratic countries in the Baltic Sea region, Poland, the Baltic states, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, and Germany, are cooperating very closely. Obviously, there can be no cooperation with Russia. That's obvious. We spoke about that yesterday. And I would like to make clear, this Baltic Sea region has a huge trade volume. Germany's trade volume with the Baltic Sea region is 373 billion euros. That's more than our trade with China. It's also more than our trade with the United States. I'm emphasizing this because the markets within the European Union need to be strong if we want to be stronger and more independent together. Let me single out one aspect which I think is very important for economic strength, and that's what Mr. Karas mentioned earlier on. We will have to focus on renewable energies, on developing climate-friendly and climate-neutral products and technologies. That's not only a question of climate protection, it's also a question of our economic strength. This is a huge topic for the present and for the future, which we should not leave to other markets. And here I support what Mr. Karas said. Europe can be leader on the world markets in renewable energies. According to the OECD, Northern Germany alone could become world market leader. And this is something we are working for Europe as a whole. Let me give you two examples. Denmark is converting its island of Bornholm into an energy island and linking this up with Germany. A German grid operator is planning, together with our partners from Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania, to build a new 750-kilometer power cable through the Baltic Sea. So we are placing our bets on wind power, onshore, offshore, geothermal energy, solar energy. We need a diversity of energy sources here, and this will create new economic spaces. It will create energy independence. Within a very short period of time, Germany managed to shed its independence on Russia in terms of energy, and that is why building up renewable energies is a question of independence, security and economic strength. And I think the European Union should continue supporting this. This is nothing we should be afraid of. This is something we should rely on for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me give the floor now to Nino Tisolani, Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Georgia.
Madam Speaker, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Spanish colleagues for warm hospitality. It is an honor for me to participate in the conference of speakers of the EU member states and discuss the issues that are important for the EU and, of course, for Georgia as a future EU member state. Georgia was granted candidate status last December, and we are grateful for the support of our partners in this important process. It is crucial that we all realize the geopolitical importance of this new reality. Georgia's geographical position presents new opportunities for the European Union, and close cooperation is essential for Georgia and the European Union to fully explore these opportunities for our mutual benefits. Over the past decade, in the process of association with the European Union, my country demonstrated an unwavering commitment to European integration and has consistently proven to be a reliable partner in the region. Despite immense security challenges and the occupation of Georgia's territories by Russia, we managed to succeed in reforms that made Georgia attractive in various aspects. Georgia reaffirms its leadership in the region by anti-corruption credentials on Corruption Perception Index, surpassing 6 EU member states and all EU candidate countries, a significant testament to Georgia's commitment to transparency and integrity. According to the Heritage Foundation's Index of Economic Freedom, Georgia ranks ahead of several EU member states with its 32nd position. We emerged as the leader among 120 countries, securing the first position in budget transparency according to Open Budget Index. Georgia's geopolitical location is both a source of challenges and at the same time prerequisite of substantial opportunities. As a connecting hub between East and West, we have immense potential to foster different economic directions. My country, endowed with rich hydro and renewable energy resources, robust transport infrastructure, abundant human capital, vibrant tourism potential, and cultural diversity, we will be a strong and valuable member of the European family. The implementation of strategic infrastructural projects is necessary to enhance Georgia's connectivity with the European Union and simultaneously to fully utilize Georgia's transit potential. The EU flagship Black Sea submarine cable project initiated by Georgia will create a corridor of green energy, boosting the EU's diversification efforts, while the development of the Anaklia deep sea port will increase our capabilities to ship large quantities of cargo and enhance international transit through the Middle Corridor. Dear colleagues, yesterday we discussed disinformation and its impact on democratic processes. Georgia is not no exemption. We also face challenges with these regards that frequently cast a shadow on the country's reputation. Reforms and accelerating the EU integration process remains top priorities on our agenda. We believe that the process should not be postponed and all candidate countries should be given equal opportunities to start negotiations on the EU membership in a timely manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Let me give the floor now to the last speaker, last but not least, of course, Anita Demetriou, President of the House of Representatives of Cyprus. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. In Cyprus, and thank you for the opportunity, dear President, to testify what is going on in my country and in other countries as well. In Cyprus, we are already facing the consequences of the crisis in the Middle East. As we are speaking, hundreds and hundreds of people, mostly Syrians, they are arriving by boats in Cyprus and in other countries with target to flee in the heart of Europe. Already numbers are devastating, and my country cannot cope anymore with that. And of course, it's not only about Cyprus, it's not only Cyprus affected, but other countries as well, mostly across the Mediterranean. That is why I'm so thankful to the Spanish Presidency that today, prior to our session, we had a meeting between us about it and developed a joint declaration that I please all of you to sign and support as we are seeking European support and common strategy about that important issue. Dear colleagues, I said it before and I will repeat it today. We need to foresee things and show our assistance and support, especially when there is an emergency, and this is a matter of emergency. And now the massive numbers, mainly from Syria, that my country and other countries receive, especially after what is going on in Gaza, reveal that there is a necessity for reassessment of the situation in Syria and reconsideration of the status of the imminent legal protection, especially when some zones are not unsafe anymore in Syria, and how that will be the case when, at least for us in Cyprus, Syrians, they are visiting Syria more than 10 times per year. So obviously there is no matter of safety. Dear colleagues, it is critical that we accelerate the full implementation of the newly adopted European Action Plan for the Eastern Mediterranean route, which provides for an increased presence of Frontex and Europol in the area. Strengthening partnerships with key countries of origin and transit, both on the level of the Member States and the European Union, is essential. It is also critical that we as European Union, we will act decisively. We need to provide assistance and support to Lebanon, a country that we all know that is in deep economic and political crisis, hosting already more than 2 million Syrian refugees, through concluding a strategic partnership similar to the one correctly conducted with Egypt. And also with the involvement of Europol and Frontex. Otherwise, all these people, you know where they will come. Dear colleagues, really we need to act proactively ASAP. The European Union's new pact on migration, approved by the European Parliament a few days ago, awaiting approval by the Council, it is a positive step, but is not enough. The situation is already alarming, mainly for Cyprus and other countries as well in the Mediterranean. And we are asking for unity and solidarity to deliver, for the European Union, to deliver its leading global position, and most importantly, to protect European citizens that they feel insecure and unsafe. My dear colleagues, we are urgently asking for your support, for European Union support. And again, I please all of you to sign the joint declaration. It's really important for us. And thank you again, my dear Focina, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President. As we've done very well with time in this first session, perhaps we could go back to that idea of having a coffee break until 12:15, if you agree, because then we just have the closing session. And we can't actually go to the next venue, the Palma March, until 1. But there is a proposal from Eliane Tillieu. Let me explain. You know that prior to this conference of speakers of EU parliaments, we held a pre-summit, a meeting of women speakers of European parliaments. So we would add to our declaration, therefore, an annex, a proposal from the Belgian parliament. I think you should have a copy of that. It's been handed out to all parliaments, which is the common declaration this is a joint declaration on more gender-sensitive parliaments, so that we will introduce our own gender equality plans there. Now, as this has only been signed so far by the parliaments represented by women speakers at that meeting, following on from the proposal from Eliane Tillieu. If the male speakers would also like to add their names to it, then that would be great. It's voluntary, so let's have coffee break. And if you would like to join us with the photo that we were taking, the support of parliaments to have a fairer society, then we, as women speakers, would be delighted to share the photo with male speakers of parliament who would like to join us there. This will be in the patio, in the courtyard, where we took the official photo yesterday. So you could join us, have your coffee, or perhaps do both. And we'll see you back in the room again at 12:15. Thank you.
Let us resume our session, and we will begin with the closing session and the adoption of conclusions and debate on the role of Parliament in a liberal, functioning democracy. So we have different requests for the floor, and we're going to do that first, and then we will have the speeches from the Speaker of Hungary and myself to conclude our meeting. So we're going to start with Othmar Karas, who is the first Vice President of the European Parliament.
Madam President, dear colleagues, at the end of this conference, I would like to thank you very much for the leadership and for the high-quality work carried out by the Spanish Council Presidency. Now, peace, freedom, and democracy, that's not something that we can take for granted. And achievements may become lost, so we cannot rest on our laurels. They have to be regained on an everyday basis. There is no doubt about the fact that our democratic fabric is facing numerous challenges caused by authoritarian tendencies, disinformation, influencing votes or elections from outside and from inside, safeguarding the rule of law, separation of powers, the independence of the judiciary, freedom of the press, media, and free speech. Well, we too are attacked. We too as parliaments are attacked. We need to safeguard that those freedoms exist. So we need to counter those dangerous tendencies because parliaments are a cornerstone of democracies. As representatives and chambers of citizens, as lawmaking bodies, as budgetary authorities, as watchdogs, as public spaces for discourse and debates, we are the centerpiece of democracy. Our joint European future, therefore, hinges on a strong and resilient liberal European democracy involving all parliaments. What it also requires is a joint understanding of parliaments concerning the role to be played by parliaments in this European democracy. Therefore, the common objectives, the core elements and basic principles that unite us, well, they need to be defended. We need to publicly commit ourselves to them. And that's why it's great that in the conclusions of the Speakers' Conference last year in Prague, the initiative taken by the European Parliament was espoused. It was about the role of parliaments as well as well-functioning democracies and strengthening modern parliaments. In the declaration of the Lyon conference last July, we took another initiative, a joint charter. And at this Speakers' Conference in Palma, we have a document on parliaments in liberal democracies, functioning democracies, as a basis for parliaments at national level and across European borders. And we're going to put this into practice before the next Speakers' Conference starts. So it now depends on us, it depends on our political will to put this commitment into practice so that we explain to all of our citizens how we see our role. Let's start out with the European elections that are around the corner. Thank you very much for having listened to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karas. Now, Valérie Rabault, Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of France, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Dear colleagues, we are now at the end of our conference. I think it was very rich in terms of the subject we talked about, for instance, the Mediterranean initiative proposed by Cyprus, or the concept that for strategic autonomy that we've all agreed upon in its different facets, for instance, energy capabilities, or the Czech initiative having as regards the manufacturing of munitions. And I think for a long time, we first started talking about it in 1994, so the concept has been around for a while, but it's really only come to fruition in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think that this is really a turning point that we've achieved because we're talking about strategically protecting our continent. And also, I think that we're going to be able to have specific, tangible results for our citizenry. And I think we really are going to be able to deliver these results for our populace. And I think that all of these kinds of strategic autonomy, whether it be for healthcare, drugs, or munitions for Ukraine, or energy autonomy, all of this independence is essential so that the European Union's initial raison d'être can continue. And we talked about a lot of things since the beginning of this conference, but strategic autonomy goes hand in hand with protecting democratic life. We've been talking about that with parliaments. His Majesty talked about this yesterday in his introductory remarks, but preserving parliamentary democracy is that and our strategic autonomy are twofold challenges that we have to meet in the coming months. Thank you very much, Ms. Rabault. And now we're going to pass the floor to Julia Conrad, Second Deputy Speaker of the Swedish Parliament.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Dear colleagues, dear speakers, let me once again thank the Spanish Presidency for receiving us here in beautiful Mallorca and for your hospitality. Regarding the Presidency conclusion, I have a few points I would like to raise. At a starting point, I would like to remind that the Presidency, in drafting conclusions, should aim for wordings that have the prospect of gaining broad support among the parliaments. Detailed statements of political nature should be kept to a minimum, which also is evident in the Stockholm Guidelines, which we have all agreed upon. That being said, I will limit myself to a few remarks relating to the references to the proposed charter. We welcome the fact that the Presidency has accepted most of our suggested amendments on the paragraphs related to the proposed charter, although we had preferred a deletion on the 2 paragraphs. We support the more caution wordings in the new draft, which only take note of the draft charter, an initiative and text that we so far have not jointly agreed or had a structured debate on. Further, we believe that it is better to commit to fostering modern parliamentarism rather than to commit to a specific initiative. But let me be clear, parliaments do play a crucial role in functioning liberal democracy, and there is a constant need to assess and debate how this role could be shaped. And this could be a very important topic for discussion and to exchange the best practices on an upcoming EU Speakers Conference. On a more personal note, let me also express my gratitude to the Spanish Presidency for embracing the initiative from the Conference of Speakers held in Prague 2022 of also hosting a meeting of women speakers, and I very much appreciated to meet so many women speakers and to the discussions we had, and we could exchange our experiences. However, at the upcoming meeting, an upcoming speaker conference, I would welcome an inclusive debate between all speakers, both male and women, on how we best can promote gender equality in our role as parliamentarians and as speakers. In closing, once again, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the Spanish Presidency for your generosity and professional organization of this Conference of Speakers of the European Union. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kronlid. Jean-François Rapin, Chairman of the European Affairs Committee of the Senate of France, has the floor. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to take a few minutes to, first of all, thank the Spanish Presidency for for hosting this yet again. Also, would like to thank you for including many of the remarks that the French Senate and National Assembly wanted to include, because I think it's important that our final declaration, our conclusion, should respect our respective institutions and respect our states. As regards parliamentary work and operations as they are carried out today, it is in our best interest to work amongst national congresses and also at the European level, because sometimes opacity can kind of obscure and obfuscate the work that we do. But we all work for the Europe of the future. And as I said yesterday, I would like to encourage all of you to implement the initiative and the points that we talked about, not just about artificial intelligence, as well as protecting our respective spaces, which are often controversial. Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Chairman. Now we're passing the floor to Eliane Tillieu, Speaker of the Chamber of Representatives of Belgium. Dear colleagues, I would like to warmly thank Francina Amengal, who is the Speaker of the Congress and of the Spanish Senate, for holding this conference, which finally is under the sun. And after 2 days, we've had very rich meetings and debates, and this bodes well for the future. As regards the conclusions presented by the Spanish Presidency, I agree and I back these initiatives that we bring it back to our individual parliaments over the course of the coming months, so that we go towards effective parliamentarism. And we, of course, will continue to talk about this at the next meeting next year. As Speaker of the Chamber of Representatives of my country until at least June 9th, I also have the pleasure of presenting a text I talked about last Sunday, and it was presented at the 71st plenary session. We talked about how women present 32% of national parliaments, 28% of chair positions, whereas in the administration of our parliaments, women represent 49% of the management positions. Furthermore, 21 of the 37 parliaments have no in-house gender policy, which is necessary if we're going to encourage female leadership. And the vast majority of our countries do not count for gender equality or gender policies, so making sure that we have gender equality and equal parity is essential for our representation and for proper governance, and making sure that half of our populations are heard. So this is essential for proper administration and operations within our parliaments in Europe. Implementing it is still slow going, ladies and gentlemen, but we need to continue moving forward. We need to have, in order to do so, we need to have specific, concrete gender equality policies at all levels, at all layers. We need to fight against gender stereotypes. We need significant participation of both genders at all levels, and we also need to publish up-to-date statistics about proper gender representation within our institutions, and these are essential essential aspects if we're going to have true gender parity. We also need to adopt a bill, and we have to have laws that are analyzed for to make sure that they do not have any kind of gender bias. And so both female and male speakers of Parliament need to both share best practices and to encourage the participation of both genders at all levels, especially women in high-level and management positions. I also would like to thank the Spanish Presidency for including the vital role, vital participation in parliaments for all women, and also we talk about the importance of having women, involving women in the decision-making process, and we talked also about this in war situations, and we have a particular attention to the situation in Ukraine right now. Also, we adhere to the gender-sensitive declaration, which is the same as the chapter about it parallels what the similar document that we published in the Belgian Parliament recently. And so we thank you for co-signing this document. About 40 people have already signed it, and it's making the rounds of our Parliament, and it is applauds the different initiatives, gender equality initiatives that were taken at the European level. Also, it calls for the publication of an annual report, just as we do at the European level, and also it calls for the signature of the text recognize the importance of actively promoting gender equality and access to all positions and fighting against biased policies, and also calls upon the reference to different academic studies, which we did last Sunday, and calling upon outside experts to illuminate and to tell us more about what's going on in the field. The declaration presented was adopted at the end of the roundtable on Sunday, and so other speakers and vice speakers, the deputy speakers, I call upon all of you to adopt this, to implement this. It was presented by Belgium for co-signature, and as a wise African said, that we can go there quickly, but if we band together, we can go farther. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Tillieu. And now Milos Vyštrik, Speaker of the Senate of the Czech Republic, has the floor.
Máte slovo, pane předsedo. Well, dear President, dear colleagues, first of all, I'd like to say thank you to our Spanish colleagues for organizing this meeting. A year ago, we organized this meeting back home in Prague, so I know very well how much work you had to do in preparing and organizing this, and I think that you did not have an easy task to organize this conference, and we also did not make it easier for you sometimes. So when submitting the amendments, we also submitted our amendments, and we will discuss it. And of course, it did happen that some countries wanted to amend the text. We did too, and thank you for accepting most of our amendments from the Czech Senate. And it also happened that at the very last moment there were some new amendments presented, and we didn't really have time to look at it and discuss it to a greater detail. And that's a pity. And I would support what our Swedish colleague mentioned, that it would be better to search for a general consensus and not to put too much concrete and specific wording in the conclusions, because then we might have problems adopting such conclusions. Because, of course, we're different parliaments and we do not have to agree on everything. We might have different views on various things. And it's also a question to what extent and how efficient and how desirable it is that women speakers are meeting without us, men speakers, that the female leaders summit didn't have an inclusive debate because the men were not there. So then you have other conclusions from the women leaders summit, and then our conclusions from this plenary summit. And I don't know whether is this okay, because some things were discussed at the women leaders summit or pre-discussed, and then it was proposed to all of us to be discussed here. And I think that we should have inclusive discussions, and if we don't discuss things inclusively, and I don't know, are we having inclusive discussion when we have these separate female discussions? So I'd like to call for an inclusive debate, a real inclusive debate. And some of us, and I of course support it as well, want to have more women in politics, and we want our women to have great conditions for their functioning. And some activities are not going in that direction and are hampering these efforts. And we have to think about it really carefully, because there are also voices that do not wish equality. They do not want more women to be in the politics, and we should not fuel these efforts. And I apologize for mentioning this, but I wouldn't have a good sleep if I didn't say it.
Thank you very much, Speaker. Before I pass the floor to the last closing speakers, we have to approve the conclusions, and I would like to give a few final remarks. We all are aware that we only will be able to achieve a more equal society if we work together, because we're all, both women and men, are interested in this. And I think that the vast majority of our citizenry agree with us as well. As regards conclusions, I would like to thank you all for your hard work, because we've achieved a consensus in our final document. There are always details that people don't agree on, but the richness of this assembly and this summit is that we managed to achieve a document with consensus, and people have made compromises. And so I'd like to thank all of the representatives of the different parliaments, the head, Maria Lopez, who is in charge of foreign relations at the parliament, and also all of the people who have been working behind the scenes to make sure that we come up with a document that follows the Stockholm guidelines. We tried to introduce a maximum number of amendments that the Speaker of the Czech Republic Senate will talk about, and make sure also that they don't contradict each other. So that also brings with it other challenges. I think that the document is that we agree on it, but there are 2 points that I think I would like to spotlight that I think are important. We've had some amendments that were not accepted, one submitted by the Hungarian parliament because it contradicted the vast majority of the other proposals that were made. So, in deference, I know it's not what we usually do, but in deference to Hungary, who is going to organize the next summit, their proposal is included in the final document, but there is a footnote that says that these proposals were submitted, but they were not accepted by the majority, and that it is not binding to any parliament. So we do have a footnote, and I will read it for you. So we have a final. So point 15, we would add, it's not part of the declaration. So in agreement with, it is a crime to, human trafficking is a crime and should be punished. And also, we also should respect national minorities. And in point 36, it would be the last footnote, that would be the National Assembly of Hungary takes issue with the final conclusions of the and is not able to meet the commitments set forth. And I would ask you to agree to our suggestion in deference to Hungary to be able to include these in the footnote. And also, in further deference to the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly of France, in point 40, they ask us to rephrase it. It's the same thing, but it's rephrased, and so I will read it as it would see. We consider it necessary to defend, in accordance to the principles and the rules laid down. Those two sentences are inverted. So it's just for clarity, but it carries with it the same meaning. So if you all agree with those suggestions, we can consider that this is approved, and we can move on to the closing remarks. Thank you very much. So now, I now will pass the floor to the Speaker of the Hungarian National Assembly as next member state holding the EU presidency. They will be giving the floor at the end of the closing session to have it, and you have the floor.
Köszönöm a szót, tisztelt elnök asszony, tisztelt kollégák.
Distinguished colleagues, I believe that you will all agree with me that now at the end of our conference, I do say thank you to our Spanish hosts, the Madam Speaker and Mr. Speaker, for the organization that was indeed smooth and inclusive, and we would also like to thank for the hospitality, and we hope that in May 2015, at the next Speakers Summit, we will be able to meet the same standards in terms of our hospitality, but please be assured that we will do our very best to make the conference at least as successful. So please allow me that in keeping with the customs, I would like to inform you of our ambitions. As of the 1st of July 2024, Hungary will assume the presidency of the Council of the European Union. So this means that our country, on the second occasion, will again play the same role after the first half year of 2011. We are faced with an unusual half year because the Hungarian Parliament will have to cooperate with the new European Parliament in the course of organizing interparliamentary events. And we are faced with a new European Parliament soon, and it depends on our voters' will what we will see. 6 events will be organized during our presidency, 5 of which will take place in Budapest, in the Hungarian National Assembly, and 1 will take place in the European Parliament, and we will be co-organizers there. As usual, the COSAC presidential meeting will open the series of conferences on the 28th and the 29th of June, and we have already provided information through our offices, and in an official letter we will inform you following this conference. The topics of the conference, in our view, will reflect the most pressing challenges in Europe, including in enlargement, the various challenges threatening Europe's security, European demographic processes, as well as the economic governance of the European Union. And let me also mention combating illegal migration, and also the future of the structural funds can be inserted into the same row. In addition to the mandatory events, there is also another topic that is very important for the future of our peoples, and this will be an interparliamentary event in the Hungarian parliament titled Cultural Heritage and the Identity of National Minorities. We have not pre-agreed with the French colleagues, but if I understand your amendment proposal right, I think it is an encouragement for you. Later on, we will have two events. The Speakers' Conference will take place in May, and the preparatory meeting of the Secretaries General will take place in February. You are very welcome to visit us in Budapest next year, and I do encourage you, your relevant professional committees, to also participate in our events. And I would like to thank you for your partnership ahead of our presidency as well. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias, señor presidente. Muy brevemente les voy a dirigir unas palabras para clausurar estas jornadas y quisiera empezar mis palabras agradeciéndoles muy de corazón todo el trabajo, la presencia, el compromiso de todos los presidentes y presidentas de los parlamentos europeos y también de todos los equipos que han trabajado intensamente para hacer posible estas reuniones.
that have been behind the scenes organizing the meeting. Thank you so much to all the staff who have worked so hard over the 3 days, including the ladies who have been doing the cleaning. They are mainly ladies, that's why I say that, as well as all of the people who have worked hard on drafting the conclusions, everybody who has helped to make this event possible. As I was saying, it's a great honor for me to be able to close this conference of speakers of parliaments of the EU. This meeting is bringing to an end the semester of Spain's presidency of the European Union's Council. Now, throughout the sessions over these 2 days, we've had the chance to delve into many of the issues that were set out as priorities by the Spanish presidency when it started last year on the 1st of July. And also, these are essential issues that the current Belgian presidency will take up and on the agenda for reforms of the European Commission for 2024. We've taken an in-depth look into the open strategic autonomy of the European Union, problems associated with the digital revolution, social media and artificial intelligence, as well as following the evolution of the situation in Ukraine and the Middle East. Moreover, we have referred to the question of the strengthening of the European Union from the economic and social perspective. We talked about the enlargement, the future enlargement of the EU, and the energy crisis and the green transition. We're very much aware of the huge interest that there has been in the different working sessions. So let me thank all of the parliaments of the European Union and the candidate countries and the friends from other countries who are here today for their interest. You have joined us in this process since the first meeting of speakers in Lyon, and we do hope that the commitment will continue in our own parliaments and that the interest will continue to grow. One of the commitments that was taken on during that very first meeting of speakers in Lyon, that was back in 2023, 29th of June and 1st July, was to start thinking about the role of parliamentarism in an effective democracy, picking up on the key principles of modern parliamentarism. That followed an initiative that was put forward by the first Vice President of the European Parliament, Mr. Karas, who has also, of course, been here with us at this meeting. Now, that commitment that we made makes it incumbent on us to continue to collaborate over the forthcoming months to hold discussions in our own parliaments in the EU as we work towards the next Speakers' Parliamentary Conference 2025 under the Hungarian presidency. And I wish you all the best success there. There is an awful lot of work behind organizing these events. So in these discussions, a lot of the conclusions we reach today will probably be dealt with, so we can go further dealing with the common joint challenges we're facing in Europe and do what we can, make the input from our national parliaments to solving the outstanding challenges, because it's only by talking, discussing, can we actually reach those agreements that can have a positive impact on our societies, on our own parliamentary realities, and on our own own way of practicing politics. One of the key elements in holding this conference is exactly that. It's an event that allows us to have a serene, calm conversation. It gives us a chance to talk, to listen, and to learn from each other, as well as to find common solutions to shared problems. That is why, from now onwards, we will continue to build on that. We will discuss and debate about the open strategic autonomy concept. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has been the greatest challenge to Europe's security since the end of the Cold War. As we have already said at this event, it has shown that there are shortcomings in Europe's autonomous response capacity, but it has also prompted strong internal cohesion within the European Union. We need to harness that. And it has also precipitated a revival in the transatlantic relationship that we have, as you can see, with the very kind presence of our friend from the Canadian House of Commons, Mr. Fergus. So this internal cohesion needs to be carried forward through all areas of security and also be a theme throughout multilateral relations with the EU. We will also be assessing over the next months the status of the reforms that have been put forward for the economic governance framework in the Union and the application of the new fiscal rules by member states, as well as the economic impact of growing expenditure on defence in a context of war internationally. We'll also open up the debate on expenditure on reconstruction in Ukraine. The economic recovery has been one of the priority themes in this semester and will continue to be so in the future. Other themes that will be priorities will be digital transformation of societies, the international regulation of AI, that commitment we have to make to renewable energies, diversification of hydrocarbon suppliers, and the necessary energy interconnection throughout Europe. We will have to go deeper and further with the European social pillar and continue to shore up the European Union institutionally. All of these issues mean that we will have to come up with a response to the major challenges that we have globally. We need to be up to the task. We need to reach agreements. Moreover, we will also make sure that in the different meetings of female speakers over the next few months, we can deal with gender perspective. That needs to cross-cut through all public policies because of the unequal impact of wars, of all the economic crises, the energy crisis, the climate crisis on the most vulnerable groups in society. And those vulnerable groups always include women and girls. That is why we're very happy to have been able to contribute to that goal by holding, prior to this meeting, a summit. That was an initiative to hold a summit of speakers who are female speakers to deal with all issues on equality from our perspective. We will also be monitoring progress with regard to the Migration Pact and the resolution of the conflict in the Middle East, and we'll continue to be particularly interested, as we mentioned yesterday, in the fact that Spain has, the Spanish Parliament to be more exact, has taken on the presidency of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Union for the Mediterranean as in February this year. We will hold our presidency during the whole year, and that will come to an end in May 2025 with the holding of the summit of speakers of the parliaments of member countries and the plenary meeting of that assembly. That will bring together parliaments of the EU and parliaments from the southern shores of the Mediterranean. We do hope that that will be an occasion to be able to highlight the fact that we will be moving towards a resolution of the conflict of the region with the solutions that have been worked on over the months. At a current time of conflict in the Mediterranean, Spain believes that this forum for debate is extremely important, and we know that we need to take this approach to resolve a conflict, thinking about peace, diplomacy and contention. Foremost in our minds must always be the protection of innocent people, and I hope that all of you in this future conference will be there. It's important that the EU parliaments make an active contribution to the solution of conflicts in the Mediterranean region. And I also hope that the meeting that we held this morning on the request of the Speaker of the Parliament in Cyprus, the parliaments of the southern European countries can also be part and parcel always of our future conferences of speakers. With the will and the wish to improve our societies, I would like to wish every single one of you every success and hope that we have a good turnout in the forthcoming European Parliament elections. As I have highlighted previously, Spain's presidency of the Council of the EU was the last full or complete presidency of this particular European Parliament, and this summit of speakers is being held in the middle of the Belgian presidency of the EU Council, and we are almost in European election period, aren't we? They will be coming up in June. So thank you so much for all of your input and contributions. They've helped us to prepare that joint declaration by way of conclusions that we will be able to put forward to our governments before we move into the European election period. So the idea has been together to seek those solutions to our shared problems, to be able to dream about a better Europe. As Maria Zambrano said, everything that mankind would like to do first has to be dreamt. I would hope that our dreams, your dreams, will come true. Thank you so much. So without further ado, this summit of speakers is officially closed. If you do have time, in the next venue, in the Palma next door, there will be a lunch reception, and we will end this summit with culture. Today is St. George's Day. It's the day of the book, and we will read out an extract of our wonderful book, Don Quixote, in a number of languages. Thank you very much to the speakers who will make that possible. So you're invited to continue next door. Thank you.